this CSS video tutorial, we are doing margin and padding property in CSS. You can watch and rewatch to the end for the purpose of learning. Let's start. Margin and padding in CSS are very powerful properties used in spacing HTML elements within or without the borders. The difference between the two is that margin creates space around elements outside or any defined borders, but for padding, it creates the space around an element's content inside of any defined borders. To understand this better, for example, in our browser, we have a default border, body section, the visible part, starting from here. For instance, when I hover on this YouTube, you will see a gray border appearing at the tip or the top of this body at the top. That distance is what we call the margin. The icon YouTube is clear at the center of this inner frame. The space in between the frame itself to the icon is what we call the padding. I will make these margins or these texts to have a visible border. For the border exists, but by default you cannot see. It is set to none. The two paragraphs I have assigned a different class name. We use this class name, define a border property. If you don't understand border property, refer to my previous tutorial. I will use the shorthand property. Solid, let me say I want a color like red. If I save, so that's a border. For the other one, just copy and paste the different class. It is pad. So this is the default. Both the two cases is 0, is set to 0 by default. Margin will start counting to the immediate neighbor. This HR line to this margin, that is the space I'm talking about. That is what we call the margin top. And right away from the body, left hand side of my screen to this red, it's what we call this. It is set to a default value of the margin. Now for the padding is the space within the margin. For instance, to set both margin and padding in each case 40 pixels, you can use other measurements of CSS. Pixel is the default. Even if you just write 40, it will assume it is pixel. It has set 40 pixel on both 4 directions. So I mean margin top is 40 pixel starting from this line because it is the immediate or the neighbor. Margin right is also 40 beginning from the right towards the margin itself. On the bottom side, it will treat this purple frame as the immediate, and lastly from the left to itself, it is 40 pixel. The padding, so make sure you save and refresh. You will see the margin is just still on the default value, but now padding is the space between the border to the content inside that border. So it has set 40 pixel on both 4 directions: padding top, padding right, padding bottom, and padding left. So that's the brief difference between margin and padding. Now we want to customize this margin and padding according to the 4 directions. Margin top sets the margin only at the top. That if I save and refresh, it only sets the margin at the top. The others are set to default 0 pixel or initial by the keyword. Left, it will also set now the margin left and the margin top to 30 pixel. Negative values are also allowed. It will go to the negative scale along the x-axis. The same applies to the padding. Let me say, for instance, padding bottom. Padding bottom now, the value I've assigned as 40 pixel. So you can use padding bottom, padding left, all the direction to customize the way you want or where you are. If you are designing a front work, as I've said, you can use negative values, you can use percentages, you can use other forms of measurements, and try to play around so that you see what will happen. Let me show you how we can apply padding in tables. I have a dummy table here. In CSS, I will add first of all border so that we see. I just pick the table itself and write border, then use the shorthand property 2 pixel solid green, for example. If save and refresh, you will see the border. So I also want the border of the cells, and I've only used the TH. We'll add another border property, border collapse. That's the work of the collapse. Then now I'll apply my padding. I want the spacing of those HTML CSS text to have a larger spacing from them. margin a reasonable value. You'll see how it will space the two texts. You can also use the margin. I want this table to align itself at the center, so I can just say 50%. So all the four values will take 50% margin, so that margin will align itself at the center of the browser depending on your size of the screen. In the next tutorial we are doing CSS height, width and box model, so stay tuned. By remembering this, prefer not to make decisions when you are angry.